I want to talk more with you about the Charlie Kirk situation because unfortunately, things are just in a downward spiral in the USA. Trump just put out a speech which is supposed to, unify the country, etc. But already he's blaming the radical left, as of course he's going to do that. The authorities haven't even identified the shooter, so we don't know a motive, we don't know who the person is, etc. But Trump's already, oh, it's the radical left this, radical left that, and this is where it's hard to talk about this stuff because, I'm want to diffuse the situation, yet Trump is literally escalating it, and then they get angry if you call them out on it. And so that's the USA right now. On top of that, you have a culture, and that's a media environment, be it on TV, cable network, or YouTube, to where people, they just want to see fighting. They want to see name calling and that kind of stuff. And hey, I am perfectly capable of doing said things, right? I can just come out and say, blah, 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 blah. And it just ends up being idiocracy, right? That is most of social media. That is most of YouTube. It's just frankly idiocracy. And so like, what do we do? And I'm speaking freely with you guys. If you want to discuss what the USA is these days, it's basically a clown car with guns. That's essentially what it is. And it's just people yelling at each other nonstop, and then they all have weapons, and this is what's going to happen. And I read all of your comments, guys. I completely understand everything you're saying. I completely understand. And people always complain every day on the channel. Why don't you talk about this? Why don't you talk about that? I can't talk about everything all day. It's hard. But I will point this out, which I completely agree with. Like right now, today, the discussion is what's going on with Charlie Kirk, what's going on with political violence in USA. And I guess there was a school shooting in Colorado today, which not that many people are going to talk about. Or you can talk about there's always a war somewhere going on around the world. You can talk about the situation in Gaza. It's terrible. And whenever you mention anything, someone's always going to be mad about something. And I always make the same statement, and people get mad when I make the statement that I care about all lives. People get mad when I make that statement, and just think how crazy and, divided people are if you can't even make a simple statement of like, hey, I care about everyone. and that's what it like, that's the environment that it is these days. And every day I think about this, and I just wrote a Substack trying to wrap my mind around it, is how can we make a world a better place? I'll say this, guys, you don't have to live this way. You don't have to live where you're constantly fighting at each other all the time. You don't have to live that way. What's going on is, and this is just the reality of the USA, I'm just telling you the truth of like, because you have to understand the roots of the problem, is you have a bunch of people who are struggling economically, right? And it is really an issue. And so people need a scapegoat. You've seen this throughout history, multiple countries. Whenever, there's something really wrong economically, you need a scapegoat. You need someone to blame. And then there's always going to be some sort of leader, something like that, to basically lead people down the dark path. That ends up what it ends up being. You can see it happening in USA. I know you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And how do you counter said things? I can spend all day, every day, and I was like literally just looking at Charlie Kirk's timeline before making my first video on it, and before writing this, I just wrote an essay about it. And it's just like, just being honest, Charlie Kirk wasn't a good guy. Just being honest about it. It's like, you have to be honest about this stuff. You actually want to address the real problems. It's just nonstop attacks on this group, nonstop attacks on that group, and I'm not going to go through all the stuff he says, but you could spend all day every day just disproving stuff that he says. But you got to get to the root cause of the problem. Is effectively people feel like they've been wronged economically. That's what it all boils down to. They took our jobs, right? That's what it all boils down to, and they need someone to blame. And there's plenty of people out there that'll say, oh, it's that person to blame. Okay, I go hate that person. And then in order to respond to said thing, you just be like, whoa, let's just like not hate other people. And then from the Trump point of view, it's like, oh, you radical leftist people that don't want to hate other people. It's like, how do you have these conversations? Someone wrote in a comment recently, and this is what I appreciate about the community, is honestly, guys, it helps me wrap my head around things going on in the world, and I hope you as well. I hope we help each other, because if you want a better world, we look to ways to build up each other. We don't look for ways to divide each other. And it's so tough to talk about this because literally the divider in chief, Trump, that's what he does every day on the tweets. You can just read what he says. Like, this is not a normal thing for a president to be like tweeting out about Rosie O'Donnell one day and like Taylor Swift another day, for reals. And you guys know I'm telling the truth. And this is sort of why whenever you have these conversations, you got to stick to the facts and just not make stuff up and just telling you the truth of what it is. It's like this awful, cultural nonstop attacks and every single day. And I also want to be clear on this, and this is where it gets really touchy because people don't like to hear it. I know they don't. I see comments all over the internet. It's like if I say, "Hey guys, there are people on the left side, right? Maybe on the more left leaning that also gaslight, that call names nonstop, right?" And I see those channels out there. They're the most popular ones. People don't like to hear the truth on that. And so, and I'm perfectly capable of doing that too. I could be like, Donald Trump is trash. Right? I'm capable of doing that. Anyone can do that. And even when I do it, I just feel like this is so stupid. But that's the level of dialogue that people have in the USA these days. It's a really, really poor level of dialogue. And it's all about the fight and the spectacle. It's verbal boxing matches every single day. And what is a real discussion? I always talk about real discussion. Maybe people have no idea what I'm talking about because you've never actually seen it. A real discussion is someone will write a comment or someone will, say something. And like, for example, people mentioned the school shooting in Colorado today. And I say, I look at it and I'm like, okay, so you're making a point of why aren't we talking about that? And I completely understand. And so I affirm that I can hear what you're saying and I understand it. And I can either agree or disagree. And I agree in this case. Yes, unfortunately, there's a shooting all the time in USA. And, why are we so focused on the Charlie Kirk thing? We could be talking about that. We could talk about any number of things. I completely understand. And I hear you. And what a verbal boxing match is that people come in, and this is basically Charlie Kirk's whole shtick. People come in and they have a list of talking points, right? You'll see it on all the cable network channels. And they're not really listening to what the other person said. They just have to go through the talking points that their party gave them. And it's all scripted. It's all a bunch of nonsense. And the people they pick to be on said panels, this is real, and I'm going to be mean, but it's just real. They're completely unqualified. It's painfully obvious. So it's not really a panel of experts. It's just a panel of people who, are really good at fighting. That's all it ends up being. And the problem that you have in USA is the, choices of pushing towards entertainment. Everything's entertainment. Donald Trump's the president, guys. He was a TV star as the president. And, that whole show was all fake as well. Even the producer of The Apprentice regrets creating a monster. And what does that have to do with the Charlie Kirk stuff is because they feed into this environment to the USA where everyone's, against each other nonstop. And then you add on into the availability of guns and you've got a really bad environment. I think you know this already. You probably also know I'm not stupid. I'm not. I can see the train wreck coming, right? And so I made preparations to protect myself and said train wreck. I write about this stuff extensively in my book, and I say all the time, it's a big theme in my book. I tell you all the time on the channel is you got to find a place that makes sense for you. You got to find a place that you feel safe and this is the reality. There's just places that aren't safe in the USA, and I hate to say it, but it is hard to control everyone else in the country. It's really hard. I mean, there's 350 million people. So I can't control, all thoughts and things that people are saying and doing on nonstop. But what I can do is be a positive person or for the young people around me. When I was a professor, this was my job. I'll tell you what my job was, and I did every day, and I did it with pride. And I always tell people I used to look myself in the mirror and say, I'm happy with what I'm doing. It's not about chasing the money. It's about making the world a better place. That's what I did for years and what I try to do here on YouTube. And basically what I would do is come in every session and introduce a new culture, a new language, a new part of world history that maybe people didn't know before. Because the more you know, the more you understand the world and you're not kicking and screaming angry all the time. Knowledge really helps. It really, really helps. And the best way to describe it is just when you think about an adolescent, baby, whatever, they don't understand the world. They don't. If you tell a kid you can't have candy, they just get really, really angry and upset, right? Because they just like, in their mind is like, I want the candy now. But as you get older, you start to realize, okay, I can't eat candy all day, every day. You guys know this, and any number of things, right? Or you got to teach the kid is like, hey, money doesn't grow on trees. You can't buy the toy today. You can't buy a toy every day, right? And you start to learn this stuff. But, at the moment, what we have, and I have to mention the Trumpy stuff because you have to understand this whole context, is this, is a guy who grew up spoiled, he grew up rich, and then he behaves that way in the White House and spreads that culture to the country. It's obvious, and it's so sad to see. For me, when I just laugh because it's so hard to talk about this stuff, because when I show you guys, say news over here in Korea, or it's not even Korea, it's like pretty much every other country in the world, like people actually talk like sane individuals on TV, but USA, it's just a clown show nonstop, and you get so used to that clown show, you think that's normal and that's the only way to live, and it's just keeps spiraling down in that direction. Where do we go from here? Again, I can't stress this enough. If you take care of people, be it healthcare, be it education, be it transportation, these kind of things, you relieve financial burdens from people, and people aren't constantly fighting each other for limited resources. That's what it ends up being in USA, right? If you feel like that all of your neighbors are all against you, they're out to get you, and there's only one job for 1,000 people, then yeah, that's the world. It's the Hunger Games, Squid Game thing. And I mentioned in the last video, I'm just mentioning again because it just keeps going through my mind. Guys, I grew up in USA. I know exactly how it is. And this is actually a true story. One of the reasons why I went into filmmaking, interested in media, was actually the movie Boys in the Hood. And you're just like, why is Chris bringing this up? Because there's a couple of reasons. So one is those movies were made during a time when people were actually really concerned about gang violence. So there's a bunch of movies about, LA, these kind of things. And it was also a time, coming out of the 80s when the division between rich and poor was increasing due to, Reagan's policies, tax cuts for the wealthy, et cetera. Trickle down never happened. And you got the same kind of stuff with Trump as well. You also, too, have many jobs are being automated or leaving the country, both, and there's people under huge economic pressures. And then you got other issues as well, where you get into, race and racism, and opportunities are different for different types of people. Then you also have the availability of guns, which even adds more to the problems. Guys, I see it all. And I always mention Boys in the Hood just because for me, that was John Singleton movie, and I was able to learn about just another world and another lifestyle that wasn't me. I'm clearly not black. I'm Asian. I wasn't from LA. I'm from Oregon. But something like that, that was something I grew up on. And it's like, wow, it's a whole other way of learning about another person's life, or for me, I grew up with, all kinds of things that I took to heart. If you guys know about my, what I used to watch when I was a kid, I really liked Star Trek: The Next Generation. Seriously, that was one of my favorite shows. And there was always a moral lesson at the, end of the show of like, how can you be better yourself? How can you learn to basically be better in the workplace? How can you understand cultures of various, situations that they go through? It was a great show. And, today we don't really do that so much in shows. It's not really about the moral, because no one really wants that. They just want more fighting and more blood. And, if there's not enough fighting, then they go to the next movie. Oh, I just want a bunch of fighting and CG, and it becomes mindless entertainment. And, it's not everyone's like that in USA. I definitely know that people are watching and consuming medias that, do expand your mind and better yourself. I do know it exists out there, but maybe that's becoming a smaller and smaller portion of the audiences. And, I'll mention Star Trek again. I'm on Star Trek thing. I'm just talking with you guys, honestly. I've been watching the show, The Strange New Worlds, and they got a really great cast. It's a really great cast. All kinds of different people are in that show. And when I see stuff like that, or recently we saw the protests in Chicago, I'm reminded that being different, you can actually get along with all kinds of people. You don't have to be afraid of people who are different than you. And I have to talk about all this kind of stuff because if you spend any time whatsoever watching anything that Charlie Kirk's ever said or Trump, you're going to see it's just all about division and blaming people, etc. And it really is hateful stuff, half-truths, misleading things, and I just see it nonstop and was like, oh my God, these are just bad faith arguments. It's just all for entertainment, and it's deeply, deeply frustrating. It doesn't mean I call for any kind of violence. I do not condone any violence whatsoever. I want to make that really clear. We should be able to talk out our differences, but you do want to do so in good faith. And that's something that you will not see very much on TV. You just don't. People don't talk in good faith on TV or on YouTube or whatever. And I'll say it's not necessarily like that everywhere. It's just you just may not see said things. The problem that we have in today's media environment, if you understand how it works, is everything's so segmented. So if you don't want to hear reasonable conversation, right? Say you don't want to watch my channel, you want to watch someone go, blah, 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 Donald Trump is trash, blah, blah, right? You can find channels that do that. See, I'm perfectly capable of acting like an idiot if I have to. I mean, it's just that's what USA is. So what can you do? You know, you're also dealing with a big problem with people don't read in USA. I did a video on that before. People's attention spans are really, really low. And I'll tell you the truth about stuff. To make your life better, it takes work. It takes real work to make your life better. You can't expect to win the lottery. You can't expect someone to just wave their, hands and suddenly magically all your problems go away. That's the world that, many people live in. They want Trump to wave his hands and like, oh, guys, all your job's going to go away and all your, everything's going to be great for you. And, oh, yeah, you're going to be so rich. Buy my stupid Trump coins. That's what it ends up being is people want quick fixes. They don't actually want the real solutions. And so, like I said, I don't condone any violence whatsoever. I'm just saying the Kirks and the Trumps have fueled onto this divisive culture for a long time now. And it's sad to see that it ends up in violence, as you guys see. In terms of, where do we go from here? The USA really needs to have a real discussion on how can we talk to our neighbors, to be frank. I just being honest with you and practical about it, I don't think that discussion is going to happen while Trump is still president. So we still have another 3 years to go. And, you can't expect even the next president to just suddenly heal the nation. It's not that easy because you have to solve the problem of there is so much economic struggles in the USA right now. And the idea that, giving tax cuts to rich people that would help, regular people is ludicrous, right? And this is sort of why I always have to just honestly just talk about jobs and money and stuff like that with people in a real and honest way, because most people won't. And it's what's crazy about our elections or when talking about politics or whatever is like that's what politicians talk about. They actually talk about jobs and kind of stuff like that. But they talk about ways that like no one really understands it anyway, for reals. And you'll see it on the right to where, they're just like, because literally I see it. They'll say, oh, Chris, you're so dumb. You just want trans people in schools. And that's literally what they write. And I'm just like, are we even talking about anything of importance anymore? Right. And how can you even have those conversations? I trust me, guys, I see it. And then they act like that's all that people on the left talk about. And it's actually not true. It's people at Fox News just focus on that nonstop. You can literally see it in their stories. And I guess the main message is, and I'm just having a talk with you guys. My main message is I really sincerely hope for real change. And I will always continue to try my best just to tell people the truth and have real discussion about everything. And again, a real discussion is you actually listen to what another person says and respond in a real way, not looking for fights. But like I said, I think this is just reality. I think things are in really, really bad shape in USA. And my advice always is put yourself in a position to where you and your family are safe. And you can define that any way that you want. And, figure out what that is, put that as your goal and work towards that every day. And for me as a kid growing up, and again, it's just stuff I read about in my book, I always knew there was better places out there in the world. I always knew that. So I worked my butt off in school. Every job that I took, I always try my best. And if you watch my channel, you'll know it's the same. I show up every day and do the best that I can, the best of my ability. It doesn't mean that you give up on your dreams when things go bad, because it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, you keep trying your best, and if sometimes things don't work out in the beginning, you change direction and you try a different strategy. You always keep trying. And that's something that my wife and I literally talk about every single day is like, how can we always improve ourselves in everything that we do, because that's what I, think about doing. And it's it's hard to talk about any of this stuff because, again, in USA, no one wants to hear it. They just want to hear the yelling and the screaming, and they want easy and quick fix. And that's part of the problem with the culture in USA. So I hope you guys understand my discussion and why I'm talking about it the way that I do. If you want to talk more details about, the shooter and stuff like that, if something comes out, I'll mention it. But I am deeply concerned about what's going to happen in USA in the future. So that's my thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next video.